Hello, everyone. How are you? Hope you're doing well. We have quite an impressive group of specialists waiting to talk to everyone right now. And it's what's called Made Again in the Fab City. I love this title. And to explain a little bit more about who they are and where they're coming from, I have two special people. They will be moderating this discussion panel. And the first person is the instigator at FabCity Research Laboratory and is leading the FabCity Global Initiative together with partners at IAAC, the Fab Foundation, and the Royal College of Arts. His name is Tomas Diez. And we have also the Director of Innovation of Space 10, which is the IKEA Experimentation Lab in Copenhagen. And he's also the organizer of Made Again Challenge. And his name is Guillaume Charny Brunet. So ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for Tomas Diez and Guillaume Charny Brunet.
Thank you, everybody, and welcome. We have sound here as well. Okay, in the meantime, you get sound. Made again in the Fab City.
Is it good?
Two big things. Made again and the Fab City.
Yeah.
I think we are in a perfect spot to put questions on the table that we would like people thinking on the future of manufacturing, people thinking on the role of new technologies in people's life, not only in the industry, but also in people, especially in society, need to ask. It's not about what we make, about the things on how we make them as well, but actually we want to really raise the question of why we make them. And I think that bringing in this place together with all these amazing technologies, all these lead industries that are basically going to transform the landscape of manufacturing in the world, is actually opening for us an opportunity to put a discussion on the table around circular economy, around distributed manufacturing, about the challenges in terms of ecological crisis and social crisis in the world, and how they are related to how we're going to produce in the future. So I think, Guillaume, that probably we can start talking about what is Made Again, where it came from, and what we have been doing during the last weeks in Barcelona, the last days in Barcelona.
Yes. Well, the Made Again Challenge actually started a few days ago and ended up last night. And it's an initiative that we've co-developed with the FabCity Research Laboratory and Space 10, which is the company I'm lucky to work for. And Space 10, just so you understand quickly, is a future living lab. It's a place in the center of Copenhagen that we have co-opened with IKEA, because we work as their innovation lab for concept innovation to make sure that the IKEA concept always remain relevant with the challenge that we have ahead of us and the world we live in. I guess we started talking about the Made Again Challenge as an idea when, together with Thomas, we were thinking about the future of manufacturing, why we make products, how we make products, especially in the light of the challenges of the world today, you know. It is said that if we keep on producing at the increased pace and the way we produce things, we might need 3 planets by 2050, as if it was even an option. So, you know, we've made things since we're able to think as men. We just thought it was time to rethink the way we make. And there's a few things happening today in the world that are super interesting. You all here at Industry because one way or another you're interested in the future of manufacturing, in digital fabrication. I think that is one very powerful movement. It is one very powerful movement that has been nourishing and nurturing another, which is the rise of what we could call the maker movement. The explosion in the number of fabrication laboratories around the world, fab labs, about 1,000 today. Altogether, we thought Barcelona, because it is the first city that committed to be self-sufficient within, 40 years, a bit less now, was an amazing playground to start meaningful conversations with people that design, make, remake, recycle products, and look into this from a design perspective. What if we could make products that are made to be made again? What if all of this could be powered by a system that is powered by sustainable energy? What if we could use materials that are recycled, that are sustainable, that are abundantly available locally? And what if we could create a conversation and partnerships, not only with the industry on one side, city in the other, and customers in the middle, but a conversation with everybody, because we believe this is the fastest way we can start off getting a taste at this new paradigm of making things, what we could call a more circular economy. So for 4 days, 5 days actually, we brought a couple of people, a few people, 28 participants. A few of them from IKEA, from the forest of Sweden, from Älmhult exactly, where everything started and where everything is still made. We took 8 of them, paired them with a few other very interesting people with mad skills. 8 people that we chose from all around the world for their experience and their perspective. So that's 8 plus 12. 12 local makers, people that call Barcelona a home and make things there from Fab Labs or from their own workshops. And we took all those amazing people together and we did something quite simple, which is collected for weeks old furniture that were on their way to the landfills. And the idea was, how do we take all those people, all those perspectives, all those amazing skills around this idea of turning something old on the way to its landfill to something new? How do we create value from wastes? And how we start thinking about a way to redesign for a more circular system. On top of that, we worked very hard with Jack, with the Fab Lab Barcelona and many other amazing people to create a prototype of what could be called the FabCity. The idea that we could take a whole territory in a city, open up the doors of workshops and Fab Labs and other amazing places and create a network of facilities, of machines, of people, of skills, and all together look into the future of fabrication. A future of fabrication that could rely on a few big principles, such as open source design, distributed manufacturing network, open collaborations, recycling material, local production, and look at sustainability from different angles, from an environmental point of view, a social point of view, an economical point of view, and make a test. And so for the last 4 days, we're all a little bit tired but super excited. We have been playing and thinking with our hands, and together triggered new thoughts.
So I want to pick up on the idea of a prototype of a Fab City in the Poblenou. Poblenou, we're talking about industry here, no? It's a really interesting story about Poblenou in the city of Barcelona. It used to be the main industrial center of Barcelona, where things used to be made. And what happened is, like, with the massive, or the mass production and the mass globalization, we have taken production out of our cities. So basically, Poblenou went through a few years in which all the industries left. They left empty warehouses in that area. And what has been happening is a very emergent and very vibrant movement from people taking these warehouses and turning them into productive hubs again. So I'd like to start with that, because doing this challenge with IKEA in one hand, I think one of the largest retailers in the world that produces their products. They are not like Amazon or Alibaba. They have a production line, which is huge. Doing it in Barcelona, which is the home of the first Fab Lab in the European Union that is pushing forward a new model for a more social production and local production, just set up like the perfect scenario for this to happen. No? With that, I think I will like to introduce our first member of the panel, who is, I'm really delighted to welcome Francesca Bria. She's the Chief Technology and Social Innovation Officer of the City Council of Barcelona. Give her a hand, please.
Where you want, in the middle. Yeah.
Introduce next.
I'd like to invite Jonathan North, who is responsible for sustainability at IKEA System. He's been working within the company for about 10 years in manufacturing and designing product, but with this common red thread of pushing the company to adopt better standard. Today, his main mission is to have retailers get a common view, approach to sustainability, and he's going to represent Interactive system here today. Welcome.
Next one is a good friend. It's Paul Sohi. He's a product designer at Autodesk. He's focused now on designing accessible prosthetics for everyone. And he's going to be joining us to talk about the global perspective of a big company that produces software that enables people to design and make everywhere. Paul, welcome.
The next three participants to this panel are also participants to the Made Again Challenge. The first one I'd like to call on stage is Samuel Bernier. He's a friend today. He's an industrial designer, art director at the Fab Shop. He's a maker, he's a hacker, and he's got amazing views on all of this. Welcome, Samuel.
I'm also delighted to introduce one of our Trojan horses in the Made Again Challenge. Is Mikael Axelsson. He's coming from the forest of Sweden. He's a mechanical engineer. He's a designer. He's now becoming a huge maker and one of the participants of the Made Again Challenge.
Welcome. And finally, Prisca Wispel, who started as a fashion designer, has an amazing eye, started laser cutting textile, making amazing things, and more recently redirected her research on growing materials, on creating new type of textile. Please.
Okay, so the panel is set. I would love to start with thinking about this new landscape of distributed production, right? When people can make anything with a 3D printer in their house, where they can go to their Fab Lab in their neighborhood and design and make something, where they can basically have access to production tools. What is the big question around how this reorganizes society somehow? And I want to point to you, Francesca, because you have done deep research into distributed networks, experimenting with new technologies like the blockchain in many research projects with the European Union, also in Nesta. I'd like to know, since you are you're kind of starting a new, let's say, period in the city of Barcelona, which are your expectations about this landscape that you are seeing? What do you think the role of a city council in such a, let's say, ecosystem for peer-to-peer production could be? Because it's also it's a new role model for companies in one hand, and they are asking themselves many questions. In Barcelona, there is already a history on how to deploy this infrastructure, but what's next? How do you see the new power models or relationships when a really engaged council with distributed networks is coming in Barcelona?
Sure. Is this on? Yeah, okay. Yeah, well, first of all, thank you, Thomas, and thanks everybody for having me here. And I would like to thank also everyone that participated in these experiments in the last days. It seems really fascinating, and the opportunity of gathering together these different talented people from all across Europe, the innovators, the makers, artists, and just communities really together with places in the cities that have particular importance for us, like the Fab Labs and the maker spaces, Ateneos de Fabricación. Barcelona has a big ecology of these kind of places that are very grounded in the community. And together with the industry, because, I mean, we know that it's a must that the industry understand the type of transformation we are living in, and understand that it's never only about a technology push, or it's never only about a wave of technological revolution, but it's about structural changes that we need in society. And so we need to work, as you just said, as an ecosystem. And not only Barcelona is committed to self-sustainability and energy independence, and to make a sustainable city starting from immediately, but also we are committed to become the most, like the most democratic city in the world, maybe. So I think Barcelona is undergoing this kind of democratic revolution. We are a government that has been elected by the people to work for the people. And it's very exciting because we feel we are in the public space, in the government. We are a connector with the communities and with what people need and how people want to live. So it is in this spirit of connecting really citizen needs with the possibilities that we see emerging from new technological models, new technological revolution, but also new organizational and socioeconomic model for improving our cities, right? So I have to say it is refreshing to be in a panel where the big picture is at the center stage. Usually when we think about the future of Industry 4.0 or the future of robotics or the robot economy, we are confronted with a very different scenario. And I don't hide that from a policymaker's point of view, sometimes it's pretty scaring. Because we do see an acceleration, I mean, not only of opportunities like robotization, artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, big data, and all of that. Clearly, it represents a massive improvement of capacity, but we do see scenarios like 100 million workers will be unemployed because of full automation. And, you know, and we do understand that there is an urgency. And this is not only getting rid of jobs, which clearly will be automated by the robot economy and the robot revolution, but this is also leading to sometimes models that are not very sustainable and not very efficient and do not bring good jobs. And this is a problem also because all these talent and all these talented people need to be part of an economy that allow them to develop their skills, their talent, and knowledge, but also to give security, social security, good jobs, and not precarization, which I think it's probably a part of the conversation of a lot of makers, like, you know, how do we sustain our work? So I think it is very important to ground this conversation of where's the new robot revolution or the new technological revolution going into a model which is socio-economic and has, of course, environmental and sustainability at the core, but also think about the how do we make it work for a more collaborative economy, for an economy that is bringing better jobs and all of that. And I mean, we know, and the industry know, that we are in the middle still of a big stagnation. We live in an economy of of negative interest rates. Like, I mean, it's very hard to see a positive economic future. So we need to reinvent it. And that's why I want to say that Barcelona is learning from the makers. Like, we are really learning from them on how to do it, and we are listening to the communities. So these kind of projects, like the one that, the possibility of creating a neighborhood of, you know, experimentation at a scale that could lead to you know, not only to prototypes, but to bigger systems. Like, we need the scale in order to turn these experiments into the next generation institutions that we live in society. Mm-hmm. And to do this, we need, on one side, learning from the citizens and the communities, what they want, how to organize their life, and from the makers and the innovators, because they're already doing it. So we already have models that work. And I just want to end this first round by saying Barcelona has already an ecosystem which is really interesting of alternative cultural economies where people are experimenting. And I think it's a mix of a need of changing values, which are not only about rapid profit making and about efficiency of everything and about just, you know, having more efficient systems, but it's about changing values of what matters to you. How do you want to live your life? What is a better economy and a better cultural system? And also because of the economic crisis. So we have seen really a rapid growing of a lot of experiments, from alternative parallel currencies to these maker spaces and fab labs, to just people creating sharing system for like sharing things and living just a different life with less, but maybe a better life. Yeah. So this ecosystem, I think, is really ready, and from the public sector, we are learning from them to understand what also a public look like, which is more common, more collaborative, and you know how to do this together. So we need to be in this together to understand, you know, how we make this experiment work in a larger scale and for the future.
Well, thanks, Francesca. You said earlier you get a lot of inspiration from the maker movement. You say how inclusive this approach should be. I'm very curious to have your point of view, Jonathan, as, you know, why is IKEA here? Very simple question.
That's an easy one, isn't it? I think we're here for a few reasons. IKEA, for those that don't know, we're a home furnishing retailer with 385 stores around the world in almost 50 countries. And we've been very traditional in our approach to retailing. As we've grown, our number of stores have grown, our physical footprint has grown, as has our consumption of raw material, to the point where today, even though we're doing a lot of good things around sustainable sourcing of our main raw materials, whether it's cotton or wood or plastic or glass or metal, we're still consuming and selling 40 million almost, or 40 million cubic meters of those products every year. And to your earlier point, Guillaume, you know, we need another couple of planets to support the growing population, coupled with the fact that we have a fairly strong and aggressive growth agenda within IKEA. So we come at it from the perspective of, for the very least of which, we are going to struggle to find more and more sustainable raw material to support our growth in the future. So we see this whole opportunity, this being one part of a total development of the IKEA retailing concept, as the opportunity to separate our growth from our consumption of raw materials. That's what we're really super interested, how we can continue to provide a better everyday life for the many people, giving them, you know, affordable, functional, inspirational home furnishing products with the least amount of environmental impact. Why Barcelona? As you rightly said, between the two of you, we've picked a real sort of melting pot of where this movement is today, in an industrialized section of the city that's almost a good circular economy story in and of itself, in that these old factories weren't torn down. We've come back in and repurposed them as factories over the last few days from our perspective, and tapped into a good source of available raw materials. So it seemed to be for us the perfect opportunity to explore some great development opportunity for IKEA in an area where there seems to be a tremendous amount of passion for the subject.
I love, I two connections I just found out, and between what you introduced, Francesca, and you, Jonathan. And if you think about, you're saying Barcelona wants now to be like the most democratic city in the world. And if you think about, you know, the slogan of IKEA is it's democratic design, right? So I want to continue that thread, and we can talk about democracy and how relevant it is today or not, but let's keep it at the positive side of democracy. And you democratize design, but now we are in the verge in which that democratization could go even further, in which the user can be part of the design process, the user can be part of the production process. And I want to take that thread and jump into Paul, because I think that users need to learn, it's a new literacy somehow that you are bringing to users. It's not learning how to use computers, not only learning how to read, write, code, but actually how to design. And from Autodesk, you have been doing that. You have open design tools for people in the world. And I would like you to tap two questions. One is, how do you see this on a global scale as the citizen, designer, producer, consumer in the same person? And the other one is like, you have been working with many projects, with many people. You see which are the, let's say, the struggles that a maker takes to take, you know, an idea to a prototype to production. So how do you see these two things working together? And yeah?
Easy questions, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got me? Okay.
Yeah.
So I think, first of all, what we're seeing in general is a shift in consumer attitude towards their product. So there is an expectation now that products are more intelligent, and that when I purchase something, it's going to get better over time rather than worse over time. So the idea of product obsolescence is something that's slowly sort of being shifted out. This is very apparent in electronics right now, particularly smartphones, which are probably the oldest example. You purchase a phone and a year down the line there's a new operating system released for it and it has new features and it functions better. And this is going beyond software and now into hardware as well. Projects like Google's Ara phone are taking the notion of hardware as being a baked-in element and changing that and saying that actually no, we can move to a point where rather than having to replace the entire unit, when your needs change and your demands change, you can also swap that out. So what this creates is a scenario where the consumer and the customer is having much more of a dialogue with the producer and the designer, whether it's at a mass scale like with the phone, or even something like what we do at Autodesk, where we've shifted up our software from a product to a service. So we have a communication with our users and our designers so that if they need new features or they don't like or they do like how something works, then we can take that information and improve it. And in some cases, they want something and we'll just put it in there for them. So what this creates now is a conversation happening in this kind of circular approach. And that actually becomes part of what happens with makers and startups. I think first of all, it's probably worth stating that there is this very common misconception that makers and startups are people just doing it for themselves or for fun, or just someone who doesn't really have a design background and is trying to see what happens. And I would say that yes, once upon a time that probably was true, but actually now you're seeing that there are a lot of legitimate companies and people who have ideas and now have the opportunity to bring those ideas to reality that are becoming very real players or innovators, right? So the idea that once, Sony and Apple and all the big companies were the places where innovation happened is still true, but these startups are actually becoming a real valuable element in that. Things like Kickstarter and all of that has helped with it. The fallacy, however, or the difficulty for the maker and the designer is the perception of process. So the idea always seems to be from the creative side of I'm going to spend 2/3 of my product life cycle designing and prototyping, and then manufacturing is something really easy that happens at the end, which is completely not true, and it's not the case at all. And this is where the hurdles come up. They go to Kickstarter and they have this like lofty idea of, oh, we'll do Kickstarter, and then 2 months later people will be receiving their products, and then realize that once they start having conversations of manufacturing at scale, that that's not how this works. And so they have to communicate that things are delayed and they take forever. And so this is becoming a real kind of need, and all these things sort of mix together, and it creates this interesting and exciting new time for consumers and designers alike. And the things like what we're doing is, we've democratized the process, so we're changing the way that we approach software in general and how we distribute and share that out. We acknowledge, for example, that makers and startups are a huge new community. And so we offer nearly everything we make for free to them to encourage their process and their creative side. And then from the manufacturing side, we develop and create content to help them understand the realities of the world. So that's kind of where we're at. I don't know if that answers everything you wanted, but otherwise I might be here forever. So.
That's totally perfect. Really well connected. Guillaume, maybe.
I think this is a very good point to raise. We don't talk enough about the challenges of startups that have the potential to digitally grow very fast and reach a lot of people, actually get limited with this question of manufacturing at scale, which is a whole science which is complicated. Jonathan could probably talk a lot about this. IKEA has kind of mastered this whole logistics, supply chain questions into this big, well-oiled machine that actually help IKEA manufacture so many products and distribute them around the world. What I'm super interested though is to go back a little bit to what you started to touch upon, which is the design process as well. Mikael, for example, your job is basically to design products that can be distributed to the many people. What does it mean concretely to design for IKEA?
Well, we use, of course, 3D printing on a daily basis to quickly make prototypes and to be able to quickly evaluate them and then make them as good as possible. But when it comes to 3D printing, I don't think it's possible now to 3D printing won't replace like injection molding at this time. Maybe in the future or so. But I think it's really interesting to see how we can use 3D printing, for example, personalize products or repair products, or yeah, on some kind do something that will prolong the life of the IKEA products. So in that sense, it's really interesting with 3D printing for us.
We had a couple of occasions during the past few days that you spent with us and the 27 other participants to the challenge to discuss about a lot of things. One of the things you were telling me is how the process of designing for IKEA, for mass production, taking into account the availability of sustainable material, all the requirement that you put on your suppliers, it is quite a very well defined process, right? Designing at IKEA. I'm really interested in hearing a bit more about about this. You know, how do you design, in what order? What is maybe different from your job compared to Samuel's job? You know, designing product. And secondly, super interested also in hearing a bit more about what the Made Again Challenge, the proximity with so many other people, the makers and other type of designers, has maybe triggered in your mind.
Yeah, well, it is, as you say, it's really defined the process of designing a product for IKEA, and it's of course a linear process, going from a design brief, designing the product from sketches, going out to the supplier, make sure that everything is manufactured in the best way possible for the environment, use as little or with as little waste as possible, doing it as flat packages as possible to minimize the shipping of air and so on. But I think it's what I learned from talking to all these guys and the experts is we talked a lot about this circular economy, and I think you can get to a certain point with a linear business model when it comes to sustainability, and then you kind of have to take the next leap into something else that could be a circular business model. And I think that's really interesting to look into for IKEA.
Thanks.
I want to pick up in the design process, Mikael, and you have been describing a very linear process in which you know what's the next step, you know your supplier, you know how it's going to be manufactured, you know what is you go visit the factory, nothing needs to change from what you brief them. So it's a really fixed model, which is probably responding to a reality. No, you have to deliver, optimize production, etc. No? But I would like to jump now to talking about design, probably for not to a linear process and not design for mass production, but design for mass customization, Samuel. And the work you have been doing using 3D printing, and I'm going to also want to use that thread and see it, you know, there are some flaws on it, and the use of 3D printers. You have accumulated errors in every step. When you release an open source design, you are depending on the machine or the customization that the user does. And learning from that experience in which you don't design for a linearity, but you design for probably created trees, no? Trees of design. How someone from IKEA could, you know, tap into this approach that is more distributed, more accumulated errors, and how your work has been influenced by what you learned about the design as it is, and how you want to drive it to something else, and what's the value that you see out of it?
Yeah. So, as you know, I'm an industrial designer. I studied manufacturing processes for 7 years. So I was basically trained to go out of university and work for a big company like IKEA and use all this knowledge to get products produced in like very large at very large scale. And around my last year at university, I started discovering this emerging community, the maker community, this maker movement. And I saw that they were using the same tools that I had been using for 7 years for prototyping, but for something else, for small productions, for experimental purposes. The machines I was using were very close. Like you couldn't really put the plastic you wanted in them, but they were building their own machines so they could experiment with their own materials. And this is when I probably realized that additive manufacturing and all type of digital processes could enable people to do what we call today distributed manufacturing, meaning that in the morning I could have an idea, sketch it down, make a 3D model, first iteration, put it on the internet, go to sleep, and have somebody in Japan, in Texas, who had downloaded it, 3D printed it, found flaws, and even made iterations of the same design, sometimes just coming back to me, oh, I downloaded your toy, it broke, I used your lamp, it melted, like stuff like this. Obviously, when you're a big company, you try to think of everything that may happen by making as many tests as possible. But when you're a single designer, you cannot do that. So distributed manufacturing enables to test your products, to get it better in a very small amount of time, and also to have an unlimited amount of iteration of the same product. People can, of course, customize it or just make it to their taste. It was quite interesting this week, because with this Made Again challenge, we had the chance to experiment a lot, and that's something that you don't do as much as you would want as a designer in a company, in any company, big or small. And one big flaw of 3D printing, because yes, it enables distributed manufacturing, but this is a discussion I have been having with Michael a lot, that you can build something anywhere you want, but if the raw material still comes from China, the problem is the same. Like, you still got plastic manufacturers somewhere and send a board to another place. So one of the big challenges we're facing is to do distributed manufacturing with local materials, and that is becoming very interesting. And this is where the little experiment that we've been doing at the Made Again Challenge makes a lot of sense, because in the Fab Lab, we use not only 3D printing, there's a lot of other machines. There's CNCs, laser cutters, and CNCs are not additive manufacturing, they are subtractive. So they make a lot of waste. They make this powder, this dust. And we decided to reuse this dust in other processes, and we didn't manage to 3D print it with an improvised SLS 3D printer, with just hacking the laser cutter. We sent some of the dust to a student who will be extruding it to make some FDM 3D printing filament. If people went to the entrance, there's kind of this funky chair that looks like candy floss or something. This is actually the powder we got from the CNC that we just melted back together. And the plastic that was used is actually just these plastic bottles. And I'm pretty sure, like, there's a good chance that these plastic bottles were manufactured in the area, because I think it's local water. So you could think in a FabCity concept that the water bottles that are filled with local water in local plastic are just ground and put back into sheets, milled. Like, you use the plastic, the leftover plastic, you can use it for CNC, for molding, and you can imagine complete ecosystems that are way more reliable than the simple distributed manufacturing we see today with basic 3D printing.
I think that's, hello? Yeah. It's super interesting, all of this. It's very, to me, it sounds like there's a lot of emerging trends and movements and technologies that are converging to enable us to have this conversation today, which is really about unlocking the power of circular economy. This idea that we can start mass manufacturing without pollution and without waste. And as you pointed out, this digital fabrication and the innovation in this era is enabling more and more people to make more and more things. In fact, almost anybody today, from a few blocks away, if they have access to a fab lab or a place with those machines, is almost able to make anything. That's in theory. The question which brought us today together also is, can we put this at scale? And that's a question I would love to go back to. But before that, let's talk about material. You say, and I think it is a very central idea in this whole circularity question, this idea of seeing waste as maybe the raw material of tomorrow. But not only. And Priska, I would really like to hear your thoughts about it, because we talk about manufacturing, distributed networks, we talk about recyclability, but you have a lot of interesting views on this material aspect. How and where do we source what?
it's the material side of things is something that has interested me for a long time, especially because I come from the fashion industry and we produce insane amounts of products, and we're not really sure what to do with them. We don't have the processes to recycle them as much as we have in product design. There are quite a few techniques that are used in product design, for example, with the plastics and recycling, that are quite available today, which we are missing in the fashion industry. And that kind of brought me towards the more biomaterials side of things, because this is a region that's going to be I think it's going to be really, really big soon. We're going to find the ways to grow our materials. We talked a lot during the Made Again challenge that it's absurd for a society that produces so much that we don't know how to decompose what we compose. And this is with the biomaterials, the idea of being able to grow something instead of fabricating it means that these new products would be able to disappear into the biosphere again and continue circulating.
Just like nature does.
Just like nature does. Yes.
Okay. So during the challenge, we had this experimentation in the neighborhood, no? In the Pole Nou. And as you know, in Barcelona, each day of the week, you have assigned per neighborhood the day in which you can take out your furniture, your big furniture. You can take out like all washing machines. You can take out all your living room if you want to change it, because you're planning to go to IKEA on the weekend. But we found out that it's also an underlying layer that is really interesting, and there is an economy. This is like an informal economy of materials happening already in the neighborhood. We have people that have flown over from other places in the world with somehow less opportunities to do a formal job, and then have found, like in hunting materials and reselling them, they are being part of an economy. No? We try to connect with these people during the challenge. It was a funny situation sometimes, but you have scatterers that they collect metals, but actually they left over the other materials like wood and etc. So having this social layer in a city like Barcelona, and it's happening in the Pole Nou specifically, how we can connect with other communities like this. I mean, we know the communities that they organize in social networks, etc., but then we have these really immersed communities. And Francesca, I would like to know maybe some ideas. They don't need to be plans or the city, but just ideas in which we can create this material economy that feeds back into on-demand production, that feeds back into real needs, and is creating this more like a fertile ground for a neighborhood, especially like Pole Nou. Huh?
Yeah, I mean, I think also from what I've heard in the panel. You need to have this kind of organic view of a city that, I mean, not only is not non-linear, but also is really a living ecosystem. And I mean, all these different communities coexist, and they have different needs and cultures and expectation. And I mean, it is also a role, for instance, of a city like ours to be an enabler and the connector to favor this, the growing ecosystem of this kind of ecologies, because we need diversity and we need all these different needs to emerge into something that I would say can generate an economy that is beneficial to the local environment. And before I was thinking when I was hearing the other people from the panel that there is this question of also the kind of democratic management of local assets and resources like water, like electricity, like waste. In Barcelona, we have been pioneering also these kind of policies that are about local control over these infrastructures and public assets and all of that, with remunicipalizing some of that, like water, which is public and is a public good. And I think on top of that, when when I think about distributed manufacturing, there is not only the manufacturing components and the material, but also distributed information and data production. And also there is another issue there, that all these makers communities and all this continuous production of information goods are creating this important knowledge and data that we need to own as a community, and then that we need to use to understand what we need and how we can improve our systems. So on that, we are planning to have public policies oriented to favor an ecosystem of data commons for Barcelona, for the city, that could be there as a resource for the communities of makers, of innovators, of SMEs, of entrepreneurs that want to create important innovation for the cities. So we need to couple the distributed manufacturing infrastructure and ecosystem with the distributed and ownership of data and information and the knowledge economy to experiment new forms of collaborative economies that are better suited to what we need locally. Because I mean, we have seen there is a lot of talks about, you know, big companies that uses data in a kind of the big monopolies of data and information. I think the vision that I hear in this panel is going towards decentralization also of not only the way we produce and how we use material, but also the ownership of information and data that can really be tailored to a reappropriation of the needs of the local economy. So this is this ecosystem. That's the way I see it. And then, as you were saying, there is all these layers of informalities that are very, very important to also to give some autonomy. And I want to finish by saying we have learned from the makers community also, this is very important about the way they use open practices, right? So they're working with the open design, open source software, open hardware, open standards. From a city perspective, we have a duty to foster open standards, to foster this community, the way they work, also by enforcing openness in the system we built, because we need systems that are favoring autonomy and democracy and not taking away that freedom from people. And this is also part of policy.
Openness.
Yeah.
Is that something we can talk about, Jonathan? This idea of open source design is and this idea that you mentioned earlier. You can go to bed, create something, send this design out on the net and have people giving you feedback. My sense into what we've been talking a lot about is that the same idea could be applied to help designers producing at my scale also adapt their design to the materials that are abundantly present locally. Is that something you see as one being part of your future of sustainability with the different dimension that we know you give to the word?
Yeah, I think I can say that, I mean, the raw material, the waste, let's say, that becomes a resource, comes from many areas. We are actively now taking the next step in terms of product development, I would say, at IKEA, and now beginning to consider how we design for circularity. We design very well for ease of manufacture, for ease of distribution, for ease of assembly. What we want to now do is take it the next step, which is more than just to say, how do you unscrew a leg off a table and replace it with another leg? But it's how do you take that damaged leg, perhaps, and now break it down into its constituent parts, take the lamination off the surface of it, take the metal hardware out of it, and repurpose that. But we also then, at least within our stores, we have a very, I would say, repeatable and reliable source of raw material today. We generate plastic on a daily basis, we generate wood on a daily basis, we generate cardboard on a daily basis, and we're now looking at ways where we can consolidate that in meaningful volumes and repatriate it back into the supply chain to make more products, whether they be plastic bottles or paper products or whatever it might be. What's challenging, though, is then coming into the context of Barcelona. I was super surprised to see this countercultural group going on, collecting from the streets, and with a fairly well-developed infrastructure, dealing with what's thrown away on a weekly or a daily basis. What we need to do is learn more about what those materials look like, because there will be no standard solution for the world. It's going to be very different in Barcelona compared to Munich or Hamburg or Stockholm for that matter. We need to understand what that material looks like and then figure out what of that we might be able to get back into our own supply chain versus that could maybe go back into the local makers communities in those individual markets. Super interesting, but we don't really know enough about it at the moment. It's very much a journey of exploration. I can give you one tangible example of the store that we actually own and operate in the Netherlands, in Delft, where the organic waste from our store that's collected from the various co-worker or customer restaurants and food preparation facilities, that waste is now consolidated in one location. The water's taken out, we reduced the weight by 90%, and we've turned that into a fertilizer, for instance, which becomes super interesting when I go back to yesterday, what we saw around this maybe opportunity to grow and take organic material and for that to become a sustainable raw material. So there's a lot for us to learn, and we're really just at the beginning of that journey at the moment.
So I think that, thinking about design for circularity, thinking about, this idea of open networks, open data flowing around, we don't have to use cargo ships full of containers traveling around the world, materials stay locally. We need to design for that possible future that we envision. And I want to connect with this example that you made from the IKEA store in Holland. You have been prototyping a possible future somehow. You experiment in the control, let's say, scenario, what you can do to give back. No? But I want to jump to POC 21, Paul, maybe a little bit. An experiment very similar in spirit and soul like the Made Again Challenge, but made in Paris for more weeks, in which you have been participating with different projects that are trying to address climate change. You went through the struggles of really taking those projects to the next level. And again, I want to really jump in how we really jumped from the promise of a better future to actually really engage the making and not really demonstrating that you can make a prototype, but actually that next step. And probably you can tell us a little bit from that experience of playing with different projects, and you know where they are, some of them are now. And then I will love to hear also about scale. Again, you touched it before in your intervention, but maybe with a specific example, how we can scale up on a distributed manufacturing using open data and these open networks that are already happening in the world, like the POC community.
So just to give you a little bit of a background on POC, basically what we had were 12 teams that were all working around open hardware innovation, and they came to the camp at various stages. Some of them were just purely concept, some of them had already built functioning prototypes in the past. The really interesting learning experience for myself and for us at Autodesk is that while a lot of designers are trained in how to produce a product and to produce one version of that, when it comes to the questions of open source and distribution in particular, documentation and actually demonstrating how to replicate a process is something that is very difficult for people to do. So it's every designer has their own logic and something that might make absolutely perfect sense to them. But then when they want to share that information out, either they lack the communication skills and the ability to actually communicate what it is that you need to do to produce this thing, and furthermore than that, they may have not actually thought about how you produce the thing at scale. So the easy answers that people always come to are, oh, we can just use plywood, that's everywhere. But then you have durability questions, and so there are a number of things that compound on top of each other. So what I've learned from that, and what we're now actually developing at Autodesk as part of our sustainable initiative, is how you train and make designers understand how to develop for manufacturing, how to develop, and in particular for open hardware, which is one of my specializations, how it is that we encourage this community to go from here's an instructables to here is a package of how to do this and how to do it yourself if you want to, but also here is a kit that you can purchase if you're simply not interested in going to a fab lab. And there are a number of ways that this is being executed. But what's most interesting about this is when the conversation of localization comes in. So there are a few things happening here. You're seeing manufacturing change slowly. So there are mini factories in every country now that are at a startup level are becoming like serious players. Their ability to be nimble is threatening in a way to the old way of manufacturing. So if you're using exclusively CNC milling and digital fabrication, you could be producing 20 of one product a day and then immediately moving in to do something else. Whereas if you're using the old way of doing it, or if you're producing in a factory in China, you have a few months worth of setup. And so you can't compete, particularly if it's just a few thousand units that you're producing. So how does this help open hardware? How does this help what they're doing? Well, what we're trying to do is basically train them to understand what localization means, how to understand what locally sourced products means, in particular when it comes to that, we'll just use plywood, which is an extremely frustrating common thing I hear. But getting them to understand, and in particular what happened at Made Again, there is a vast resource of materials out there that you can get locally. So whether it's locally sourced woods that you're then able to reproduce and scale, all the way through to getting them to understand what design efficiency means. So if you are going to CNC cut, how is it that you can make the most efficient use of material, efficient use of machining time, and then how it is that you can make something or reclaim from what's happening on that side. So that shift is happening, but it is slow. And it's really what's interesting about it is that it's not about adjusting consumer attitude and trying to make eco products attractive, but rather demonstrating and training designers in how it is to take the products that are already desirable that they produce and adjust how it is that they're making them. And that change is happening. And in particular, FabCity is probably one of the most kind of incredible examples of seeing an economy like Spain's that was hit so hard by the recession in 2008, and having and essentially pulling itself up by the bootstraps and going, rather than relying on external manufacturing, rather than relying on external sourcing and products that we import, but invigorating and encouraging this new generation of designers, new generation of students who are graduating. I was one of those students who I completed my undergrad at the same time that the recession hit, and saying to them, it's not the end of the world, but rather this is the beginning of something new. This is the beginning of something exciting, where rather than being a designer, a nameless designer in a massive conglomerate, you as an individual can now produce something and share it with the world, and it's valuable. And you're hitting all these boxes as well. And I think that's the change that we're seeing, and I think that's the way that things are going.
I'm digesting, just like you did. I'm very curious to, you've been playing around, Samuel Prisca, you've been playing around for the past few days with a few very interesting ideas, this idea of decomposition, recomposition, this idea of taking an entire piece of furniture, shredding it, mixing it, and then using digital fabrication to reuse these materials. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts about how advanced manufacturing processes can help people, makers, experiment with reusable and new material.
Hello? Does it work? Yeah. Okay. I think it's not only additive manufacturing and these techniques that makes it possible to experiment with that. It's the fact that more and more of them are open source, and the fact that the softwares we're using are open source, so we can hack around this ecosystem and try to do our best. And that's actually something the industry has learned to do for such a long time, try to value their waste and actually sometimes even make it an argument of sale. But on a smaller scale, it's sometimes much more difficult when you're a smaller ecosystem to reuse your waste, because you don't have all this the structure to push you to do that. I'm pretty sure that like for IKEA, when they produce something, they have the forest, the tree is cut, it goes into the factory, furniture is produced, and probably another tree is planted. If you want to do that in your backyard, it's much more complicated. And you realize that if you want to build a chair yourself from a tree, you'll probably spend a few weeks. So there's a lot of energy going there. But I think that searching ways to be able to do the same, not exactly the same, but to copy the industry, like inspire yourself about what the industry does, and back and forth also. I think what is done on a smaller experiment basis in Fab Labs should also inspire the industry, because both have a lot to learn from each other, and they're only starting to connect.
I totally agree. I totally agree on the part about connecting the two, because the things that are, we've become extremely efficient in the mass production side of things, and all of that knowledge and all of that, it's no waste. It's extremely sustainable in that sense. And what we're missing is the other side, like what can be done that can make it circular again. And that part seems to be easy to do in this Fab Lab environment, or these places where we can experiment things much faster and we can try crazy ideas without too much risk. And it's that part of it is really what I find exciting about everybody being able to play around with different things, because ideas come up, the knowledge that is shared between people, this open source side of it. For me, it was what made me start with biomaterials, because somebody actually just posted the recipe online, and a lot of what I started with also came from Instructables. From Autodesk, just looking up somebody's crazy idea and then taking it from there, and I've brought it all the way to manufacturing, because then I could apply it somewhere. So it started out as something I did at home, and all of a sudden it made sense. A part of that production, that process made sense, and I brought it all the way to production. So I think that discussion is very important to have.
So I'm probably gonna try to now throw a question that is common to all of you, and try to challenge you a little bit. Since we just finished the Made Again challenge, we need to keep challenging ourselves. We throw let's say a challenge for cities in the world to become self-sufficient by 2054. 2054 is long enough for the majors to be probably dead, and it's something really easy to commit with. No, it's really 40 years, doesn't matter. I sign up. It's like the Kyoto Protocol, etc. No, so you can really compromise the future as much as you want. No, but I would really like to know, and I would like to start with you, Mikkel, from your experience and how it could influence the way you work during these last 4 days. How do you see your work changing in the next 2-3 years? Think about the next 2-3 years, and how do you think this new ecosystem for distributed production, this new way of sharing knowledge across networks, maybe, I don't know, start to produce some of desirable changes, and probably some that you are not desiring. So what do you think? Which are the desirable ones, and which are the ones that you don't want to happen in the next couple of years?
Yeah, well, we are here because we think it's really interesting with the circular design and so on. And I think one thing that I've been thinking about is that as a designer, we go to the supplier and we look at the production line, and we look at the raw material to see what we have to work with. But one thing that we could maybe happen in the future is that we start with the waste instead. Go to the local places and see what kind of waste we have and start with that. So,
Francesca, if everything goes according to the plan, what's the best scenario in which in 2-3 years the best things happened in this city? Where are we? What a citizen in Barcelona can do in a 3-year time, when everything we planned as best possible happens.
Well, I mean, I'd like to think actually about this. I think also in this panel and the experiments you're running, I think one of the central points is the creation of awareness, of a collective consciousness and awareness about the needs that we have and all the different sustainability practices and how we can learn from each other and build this kind of shared knowledge. So I think there is a very big component, which is, for instance, how the Fab Lab world or the makers world is now getting closer to schools and getting closer to where you kind of shape the mind of people very earlier on, creating a kind of different perception. I mean, the circularity is not just an industry question. I mean, it's really this mindset of understanding how things are connected and how we can operate in a different way. So I think without that awareness and consciousness, we just cannot do it. I mean, clearly we cannot hide that there are structural, geopolitical, economic questions when we talk about it. It's not just one industry cannot do it alone. I mean, we operate in this system that has gone in a very different direction from what we're discussing here. So I'd like to think that we can start from this awareness and get closer to where people start understanding how things work. And actually, this is what I've been always jealous about Sweden. And I was just discussing with the mayor of Stockholm a few days ago, where she said we are like leading on the sustainability agenda. And why? And she told me because earlier on in school, I mean, nowadays we have the kids that are coming to us to tell us, no, you shouldn't recycle this way, where you should put things. I mean, now they're the kids that are really complaining with the parents where things are not done differently. I think with open source culture and openness and sharing knowledge is the same. I mean, now are the kids that are like teaching know how to do things differently. So we need to revert this kind of knowledge flow. And so I'd like to think at Barcelona as this kind of advanced place where you can have these kind of experiments, but really starting from changing the very foundation of our institution where knowledge is created.
And changing foundation is not an easy thing. It doesn't happen overnight. Thomas, you framed the question around a 2-3 years timeline. What do you think of that type of frame to change something drastically or not within IKEA? Jonathan.
I should be very careful with what I commit to on camera for IKEA. I think what's possible in 2 or 3 years is for us to see what we've done over the last few days in Barcelona happening in many cities around the world, and not just for 2 days or 3 days at a time, that we've found opportunity to engage our customers, to engage the many people that like and embrace and touch IKEA on a daily basis, that they can become part of designing our products, extending the life of our products. I'd like to think also that within reason, 3 years may be ambitious, but within short order after that, that we can say that our growth is no longer completely proportionate to the amount of raw material that we consume, that we found a good systematic way to get material back into our supply chain. Those factories we talked about being in the forest next to the trees, maybe those factories now in some cases are closer to the source of the recycled material, that we've brought it back into the city center in some respects, that we are now not just designing around democratic design, but also designing for circularity around putting more and more recycled content back in and minimizing our footprint on this planet, and that we're not continuing to grow our business the old-fashioned way I referred to initially. It's not just about more stores, more cubic meters of trees and plastic and wood, but we've actually separated from that old way of thinking.
How does it inspire you to think about that kind of future as designers?
It's really inspiring because the idea of being able to do something locally like that, and also like you talked about the organic waste going into one place and being able to bring that back, for me that's going to change a lot in the way that we can talk about things.
So Paul, Well, we have the commitment from IKEA, no, to go back to the cities. It's a commitment, a 3-year commitment.
I'd like to think so.
It's a commitment to explore.
I will say I'm a bit worried about this ambition to be self-sufficient in Barcelona.
Yeah.
My sustainability colleague from IKEA Spain sits in the front here, but I still hope we have a store here in the future also.
Okay. So going from that, the next 2-3 years, Paul, apart from finishing your PhD, what else is going to happen?
I think for me, the next 3 years, like the big things are, it's really encouraging coming to Barcelona and seeing the project itself. It reinvigorates to me the validity of open source as well, because sometimes when you're working on those things, it can be discouraging particularly because open source is a community that will have a lot of kind of half-finished projects. And so my kind of ongoing goals beyond the PhD are going to be to continue to work with this community, but also part of that is going to be working with the kind of more quote-unquote serious designers and basically reintroducing in a way the conversation around sustainability, but the conversation around sustainable design.
Yeah.
Like my personal goal would be that by 40 years from now, we don't need recycling bins anymore. Like I just personally feel like recycling bin is the result of the failure of a designer to say like, it's the consumer's problem once I'm done with the design. I think 40 years from now, if we don't see recycling bins anymore, that's where we should be.
Love it.
We have 3 minutes left, 2 actually. And I can sense we all believe into a brighter way of doing things, about making things together in cities, with the makers, with the industry. I mean, I would really like to hear your thoughts about if there was one keyword that would be crucial in order to unlock this vision, what would it be for you guys?
I don't have a keyword, but I would like to say that I think that all the designers around the world would like to design for circularity, but there's like no point to designing for circularity if you don't have a circular business model. And I think but I think also that it's our job, the designers, to push and show the way, like how we can make it better in the future.
I got your keyword, is business. Yeah.
What?
Your keyword is business. Okay.
Maybe.
That's surprising coming from Michael. What would be your idea of a keyword?
Information, actually.
Information.
And easily understandable information.
Accessible
information, yes.
Francesca.
For me, the keyword is probably commons, and the common, because we need access to common and share resources in a democratic way, and we need to shift probably business models from highly short-term profit-making business model to thinking more about the public good and the common good and building for longer term. We need a longer-term vision of what the economy and society need, and then everything can follow with that.
Commons.
For me, it's I'd like to steal Nike's tagline, just do it. I think we have a tremendous opportunity here, and I'd hate to think that we lose the momentum and the excitement and inspiration from these last few days. We're in a period now of development, and we want to innovate, we want to develop, and we want to continue to push our business forward. And we can't do that in a classroom, we can't do it in our office. We need to be out doing it.
Just do it. You really want to go, you just want to go all Nike on circular economy?
I want to do it our way. I want to do it the
Your
IKEA
way.
way.
Okay.
I think my keyword is what it's always been. It's innovation, and never to accept the status quo, to constantly be questioning how we do things, why we do things, even if you don't change it afterwards, just to be aware of why things are the way they are, and to make something new and more awesome.
And Sam?
My keywords, I would say adaptation. because the world is changing, and I think pretty much everything is, and companies need to adapt to maybe an evolving economy. Cities need to adapt also to different people, different politics. We have to adapt to their change of politics, and they have to adapt to our change of behaviors and our change in mentality.
So I would like just to say quickly that you are all invited to visit some of the results of the Made Again Challenge in the Maker Pro area, and also other amazing projects from makers that are trying to change how we make things and how we distribute things. Actually, we have real practices around going on.
Small sample of what came out, knowing that the outcome is very interesting. What really happened during those past few days is that we did create a moment and an excuse to have a meaningful conversation around this big challenge, because the challenge is big. It's not going to happen overnight. But what we are sure of is that it's not going to happen through competition. It will happen through open collaboration. And that's what we're all representing here. And I just want to say thank you to all of you guys for sharing your point of view. It is just the beginning of a journey. So I hope we'll see a lot of you a lot often. Yeah?
I'm going to keep doing it. Yeah?
Thank you.
Thank you.